It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Howdy, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Ho, ho, ho. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, a recovering Douglas Coleman. I'm feeling much better every day. Thank you for joining us. Nice to have you with us. Don't have a lot of time to chit-chat. We've got a full show, interview, and music. Kathryn Leigh Scott is here today, returning guest. She was here about 2 years ago, and I was so excited that she agreed to come back and talk to us. She's got a new book out called Now With You, Now Without. It's about the caregiving that she gave to her late husband, Geoff Miller, when he was diagnosed with PSP and ultimately succumbed to the disease. She will talk about that as well as talk about her time on Dark Shadows, which she was one of the stars of the show. If you're not familiar with the show, it was a TV series that ran from 1966 to 1971, and it was unique. There has never been anything like it since or before. If you get the chance, check it out. It's on Netflix. You can also get the DVD set. It's a great show. It's very interesting. It's different. If you like vampires and ghosts and supernaturals and kind of a live theater-ish sort of setting, the way they did the show, I think you'll enjoy it. Before we get to Kathryn, we've got music to play from Music X-Ray submissions. Sorry for the backlog because we've been on break. We're getting to them as quickly as we can. Thank you for the submissions. We've got 4 tracks to play today. First one is called Time Has Come by Betweenzone, followed by Right Love, Wrong Time by Aaron Bloomer. The World Cup by Josh, I think it's Joshiver, could be Josh Iver, Joshiver. And finally, Like I Could by Valeria Prida, or Prida, Prida. So, without further ado, here is the music, followed by a short commercial break, and the interview with Kathryn Leigh Scott.
Realize, let it go. Why whenever it comes to love do I always fall alone? Why whenever you come near me does my heart beat so fast? But now the bass is picking up and I can't slow it down, and I feel my mind racing. Am I losing it now? Why do they say we are too young to get ourselves attached? But our first true love has finally had right love, wrong time, heartbreak, I lose my mind. Too soon, both lose, these silly games fall behind. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. Sometimes I just don't know how I'll let you go, how I'll let you go. We've just gotta find our time, but it's not our time right now. But the clock is ticking now, but don't you make a sound. Can't you feel my heart beating? Why do they say we are too young to get ourselves attached? But our first true love has finally hatched. Right love, wrong time, heartbreak, I lose my mind. Too soon, both lose, these silly games fall behind. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. You're not alone in this. It's not a hit or miss. It's truly something. You're not alone in this. It's not a hit or miss. It's truly something. Right love, wrong time, heartbreak, I lose my mind. Too soon, both lose.
We've only ever wanted you. We've only ever wanted you in all that we do. Put ourselves through, going out of our minds, thinking maybe this time words can describe it, can't hide it, no point lying, we'll all end up crying when you play in the World Cup. Score a goal in the World Cup. When you lose in the World Cup. Finally lift the World Cup. We've only ever wanted you. We've only ever wanted you in all of our dreams, on fields of green, filled with emotion, undying devotion. Words can't describe it, can't hide it, no point lying, we'll all end up crying when you play in the World Cup. Score a goal in the World Cup.
been spending nights chasing fireflies, hoping that you just can't be back. If you only knew how you make me feel, then it wouldn't be so unreal. Whoa, whoa. 'Cause I should have told you this, but it's too late. Lay you to bed when we could have been, and then you would have understood that no girl will love you like I could. Whoa, 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 like I could. Whoa. It's 2 a.m. and you're in my head. You're so misled. So I give it up and I call you up and I say, whoa, whoa. 'Cause I should have told you this, it's not too late. I'll lay you to bed when we could be, and maybe then you'll understand that no girl will love you like I could. Whoa, whoa, should have told you this, but it's too late. Lay you to bed when we could have been, and maybe then you'll understand that no girl will love you like I could. Whoa, like I could.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
After the loss of my dog Mandy, I had difficulty sleeping. She had been my best friend for years. She slept on the end of my bed, and I found her snoring soothing. It was difficult for me, as I also found little support for my grief. Not being able to sleep was the worst. I decided to create an audiobook to help people like me. Listen to my voice as you drift into a peaceful sleep, taking a journey using your dog's memories accompanied by rain falling, birds singing, and a waterfall. To get your download, go to Amazon and search Relax by Jane Yates. Thanks to Douglas Coleman for the spot.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on epsmusicproductions.com. That's EPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. See? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Wrong hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Kathryn Leigh Scott. Hi, Kathryn. How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you, Douglas. It's so nice to be with you again. I really enjoyed talking to you the first time around.
Well, the feeling is very mutual. I was very happy to talk to you. And as we were just talking about before we got on, you made a Dark Shadows fan out of me. I had not watched the show prior to speaking with you, but after we talked the first time, I looked it up, and I got all the way up to where Barnabas is tormenting Julia.
Oh my gosh, you've actually have been on a marathon then. That must have been, that was the second year of the show.
Yeah. I lost track of it because what happened was, right when I got up to that point, they pulled them all off of YouTube.
Is that where you were watching them? Well, you know, it is available on Netflix, and also MPI has made all 1,225 episodes available on DVD. So we are getting, it's not just you, Douglas, but we are still attracting new fans. And this is almost 53 years after the show went on the air.
Wow. Now, you were just telling me about the very first show. Tell us a little about that. What were you...
Oh, well, you know, it was my very, very first television job. I think I did a hairspray commercial before that, but otherwise I'd done only stage work. So to do live television was really scary. We did rehearse for the first two episodes for about a week. So that we were really comfortable with each other, and you know, we'd had a chance to build our characters. But that very first day, I was in the Collinsport diner, and Alexandra Molka was playing Victoria Winters, and she arrived in Collinsport and came into the restaurant. So our very first scenes together were her introduction to the show. And to the town. And I remember serving her a cup of coffee and saying, "You're a jerk, Jerk." And she looked at me surprised, and of course I had to tell her that eccentric family living up on in Collinwood, where she was going to work, were maybe more trouble than she bargained for. So it was a really fun first episode. There was conflict right from the beginning. But for Alexandra and we both just graduated from the American Academy of Dramatic Art, so we were both nervous. I mean, when that little red light went on and we realized that everybody, including my family back in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, was tuning in, it was scary.
Now, I do have a question about the shooting, because when I watched it, there were obvious places where the actors missed their lines. And in one spot, there was, I think it was Lewis called Victoria, called her Carolyn or something, called her the wrong name. And they just left it in where you would...
Oh, well, we had to. I have to say, we were actually working in the last days of live television. Even they make a pretense of doing live television today, Saturday Night Live and so on. It's not a pretense. I mean, it is live, but it's not live the way we did it. I mean, there was no fail-safe at all. You couldn't cut to something. We were out in the middle of an ocean in a boat without a paddle, put it that way. So think of it as live theater. You've seen summer stock where,
Sure,
you're doing one play while rehearsing the next, and things don't always go smoothly. That's exactly what happened. We had only about 5 hours to rehearse each half-hour show. We came to work in the morning at 8 o'clock. We had just a blocking rehearsal, and then a quick run through to make sure everybody remembered what they were doing. But this was not in the studio. It was in a rehearsal hall with chairs standing in for couches and coffins. And then when we went down on the floor, we had another camera blocking. And then we did wardrobe and makeup. We had what we called a stumble through, which was a dress rehearsal. And then we went live. So in those 5 hours or so, we really had a tremendous amount of work to do, especially when the show started using a lot of special effects. So, or when we had costume changes, and of course, you watched the 1790s, you know that we were also dealing with period costumes and ghosts that appeared out of the ether. I mean, so it was, you had to have your wits about you. And if somebody did drop a line or which happens on stage, or you fumble with a word, it stayed in the show because we were live. We could not edit. The show was episodes were literally mailed, U.S. mail, to the affiliates on the West Coast. And we did what we called kinescopes. And a kinescope is when you actually record or you film what is on the studio monitor. So you were watching, so there was no editing possible. And those kinescopes were actually mailed in the U.S. mail. I've got a couple of those old tin boxes with kinescopes in them. There's no way of looking at them.
You have to have a film projector? It's a film, right?
It's a film, yes, but you'd have to, fit it into the sprockets and an old reel to reel. Okay. I mean, I don't know where you would find one of those old Bell and Howell, machines somewhere. But every once in a while, I've auctioned one off for charity and signed the round tin box. But they're battered because they went through the mail.
Oh yeah.
Once one explains all of this, which I've done, I wrote a book called Dark Shadows Return to Collinwood, which is a story about all 5 decades of Dark Shadows. It's everything you could possibly know. But once you explain what the process was back then, the young fans who are 12, 13, 14, who have never even heard of such a thing, they're busy streaming and doing all sorts of things that weren't even thought of 50-some years ago. People then are a little bit more forgiving about what we call our bloopers.
Well, I was curious about you said that it was live. Okay, you didn't do it in front of an audience, though, right? It was just live in the studio.
No, thank God. No, that would have just been absolutely hideous. First of all, those half-hour shows that are done before a live audience, you go in on a Monday and rehearse them and do them on a Friday. No, that's a luxury. If we'd had a studio audience, it would have been completely impossible. No, this was a half hour, and it was live. I mean, it went out live, but the kinescopes, the show is on kinescope live, and that's what you saw.
Okay.
It was It's still live because no editing could be done.
Now, were there any videotape copies made at the same time, or film copies made?
No. And I remember my husband happened to say to Dan Curtis once, many years ago, of course, it's too bad you didn't film it. And Dan glared at him because, of course, that is what Desi Arnaz did when they did I Love Lucy back in the 50s. Desi Arnaz was very, very bright and innovative, and of course they bought a studio and called it Desi Lou. But it was Desi Arnaz who filmed all of those episodes and then had retained the rights to them, so they owned it. If only Dan Curtis had done that. If we had filmed these episodes instead of doing them on Kinescope. There is one episode, I don't remember which one it is, but they could never find a kinescope to reconstruct. So, in fact, there is one episode where Dan Curtis had to bring in the actors to read the script. To read the script because there was no kinescope that anybody could find. These were, by the time they got around to putting these back on the air, a lot of the kinescopes had gone missing.
Now, I'm kind of curious why you did it that way. I mean, why didn't you just videotape the show?
There was no videotape, Douglas.
There was no videotape.
I'm sorry, there was no videotape.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there was no color television. This precedes all of that. We were black and white for the first year, and then we were told we had to do all sorts of tests, and you can't imagine the flurry of activity when Dan Curtis said that we were going to go to color. That was a big deal. No, we were before color television. We were before video.
Wow. Okay.
There was video, or we would have done it. No, unfortunately, the only thing that you could have done back then is to film it with movie cameras,
which would have been really expensive, undoubtedly.
Well, it was. Well, if you were doing something like Desi Arnaz was doing with a nighttime, primetime show that was hugely successful, I Love Lucy. It made sense, but and it was filmed properly, like a movie. It wasn't filmed like a television production. But to do a daytime soap, the reason why I think all of us felt awful about all of those bloopers is that Dan Curtis would tell us, "Oh, don't worry about it. A bunch of kids and housewives are going to see the show once, and that'll be the end of it." You never thought that nobody ever replayed a soap. There were no reruns of soaps.
Yeah, true.
It didn't exist, so there was no reason to hang on to anything. It's the reason why so many of the Johnny Carson episodes of The Tonight Show don't exist anymore. There are very few Dave Garroway Today shows that lasted because they reused the kinescope.
And just over time, those kinescopes got pretty bad quality-wise.
And they lost. And they were lost. They were literally lost in the mail.
Yeah.
So once one explains all of that, it makes everything a lot more clear.
Oh, it's too bad, though, because Dark Shadows, I mean, when you kept referring to it as a soap opera, but it was very different than, As the World Turns or General Hospital or some of those. And
as a matter of fact, it was much more like, and I'm going way back, it'll only be your listeners of my vintage who will understand this, but Walter Cronkite did a wonderful anthology series. So did Steve Allen, historical things. There was Panorama, of course. And even those, very few of those were saved. But our show was more of an anthology series. We borrowed from the best of classical literature, the story of the Portrait of Dorian Gray, Herman Melville's Scarlet Letter, of course Jane Eyre, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I mean, we borrowed from classical literature, and we time traveled. Our show took place in several different time periods. We all play different characters. It was like a repertory company. So in many ways, our show was innovative. It was certainly unique. There was no other show like it.
No, I can't think of anything even close to it.
No. So, I mean, it is a relic. I mean, you watch the show for what it is. You know that there are going to be bloopers. You have to know that it was done live. You have to know that it's slower paced. It's 50 years old. It would be like, watching a Hoot Gibson cowboy movie.
I don't even know who that is.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, if you weren't a fan of Hoot Gibson and Hopalong Cassidy,
well, that one I remember.
Bob Steele, these were the shows I grew up with.
Are you still in touch with any of your Dark Shadows cast members?
All of them. I had
All
lunch with David Selby about 3 days ago in LA. I talked to Laura on the telephone all the time. Johnny Carlin, who played Willie, is a great friend. I see all of them. And what's really fun is that there's a British company called Big Finish. And for the last maybe 10, maybe more years, they've been reuniting the original cast in recording booths, and we all put on earphones, and we do these original dramas. And in fact, there's a box set of a new Big Finish audio drama coming out shortly with me and David Selby.
Oh, wow.
It's just so much fun because, we did one with Mitch Ryan and Marie Wallace and Nancy Barrett, David Selby, Lara Parker, Jim Storm, Chris Pennock. There we were. They were all in a recording studio. It was wonderful.
I read something that David Hennessy lives in Colombia and runs a restaurant or something now.
I haven't seen him in many, many years, but he was the child actor. He was the 12-year-old who played David.
Young David,
and was his governess. And he was a child actor. When I joined Dark Shadows, I have to say, little David Hennessy was far more experienced than 3 or 4 of us. He was... he'd already done quite a lot of television work. Anyway, he was a child actor who decided to give up acting, and he became a restaurateur. I remember my husband and I visiting one of his restaurants in New York. That must have been 30 years ago. And then he moved to South America, and I think that he is running restaurants and hotels.
Yeah, that's what I read. I thought that was kind of interesting.
He's very successful.
I was looking over your movie credit list, and one of them that I just had to ask, if you don't mind, was Assassination.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted to ask is because I'm such a huge Charles Bronson fan. He was like my favorite tough guy of all of the tough guys in the 70s. He was my favorite. And I just wanted to ask you any memories of him or working with him. And what was he like? Well,
he was actually a very, very good actor, as I'm sure you realize. He was a wonderful film actor, certainly, and he was very gentle, soft-spoken, and very quiet in person. There were so many moments with Charles, and of course his wife, who was just a lovely, lovely actress who passed away. She was actually ill when we were shooting that film. But we did location work in Washington, D.C., and I played the press secretary. And what was really fun, and I have to say, Charles got a real kick out of my enthusiasm for being allowed to drive the wrong way on one-way streets, which I did get to do. When you're on location, they'll change traffic patterns for you, and that was really fun. But we shot in Washington D.C., but also in Los Angeles, and they built a White House set in this park, and when you were on that set, honest to God, you believed you were standing in front of the White House. It was really quite fun.
Wow. I haven't
and
seen
a
the
really
movie.
close friend of mine, a wonderful director, Peter Hunt, directed it. And I had also worked with Peter Hunt in England. He directed me in a television series based on the Philip Marlowe short stories. It was called Chandler Town, Raymond Chandler stories. And Philip Marlowe was played by Powers Booth.
Oh, okay.
And I played Annie Reardon, and we did a number of those together. So it was lovely to be reunited with Peter Hunt.
You've worked with quite a few people. I saw you were in The Great Gatsby with Robert Redford and Sam Waterston.
And Mia Farrow, yes, and Sam Waterston. That was wonderful. I loved doing that, and that was Jack Clayton who directed it. And now recently, I worked with Richard Gere in a film called Three Christ, which has not been released yet. And I'm in Rainy Day in New York, the Woody Allen film that's not out yet, and also a film called The 11th Hour, which I filmed last October, in which I played Mamie Eisenhower.
Wow. Oh, that sounds
And
like
that is really fun. That I just saw a bit of a rough cut with the director. He kindly gave me a ring and said that he wanted to show it to me. So I sat in his little editing place and we watched a good portion of it. And I'm really excited about that. The wonderful actor named George Curtis is playing Eisenhower, and Campbell Scott is the lead in it, and he's terrific. That was really exciting. When you do period work like that, and you're playing a real person, there's a special sort of feeling with it.
Is there anybody that you've worked with an awful lot of people? Is there anybody that you didn't work with that you wanted to work with and maybe just never got the opportunity? Like one of your heroes?
Oh, gosh. Yes. I mean, there are so many. When I think of the people that I did work with, that list would be almost endless. People who have since passed away that I'll never have that opportunity to work with. I mean, I was so lucky to have worked with Jimmy Stewart, Joan Bennett, Lana Turner, for heaven's sake, and Dirk Bogarde, one of the really wonderful actors. I mean, there are so many people that it was just a joy to be on set with them. And in the case of Jimmy Stewart, we did Harvey together in London, and we worked together for 7 months. And every Wednesday and Saturday, the matinee days, the two of us would go off and have lunch together. Same restaurant, same meal. On Wednesdays I paid, and on Saturdays he paid.
And what did you have for lunch? Do you remember?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. It was all there. They always, it was a wine bar. We didn't have wine, but we did have, we always had quiche, and it came with a salad. And I think it's the best quiche I've ever had in my life. We never tired of it. For 7 months, I had quiche twice a week.
So nobody you could single out for who you wanted to work with?
No. Gosh, I mean, they're just, I think it would be wonderful. I mean, there are actors that I just think are so good to work with. I mean, to work with somebody like a Christopher Plummer, or I think it would be great fun to work with George Clooney. I've just heard lovely things about what it's like working with him. I mean, I don't know where I would begin or end. There are just so many people.
What about Brando?
Well, yes. How about Olivier? Yes. I mean, if the sky is the limit, I can't think of anybody that I wouldn't jump to work with.
John Gielgud would have been another one on the list.
Oh, but I worked with him.
Oh, you did?
Yes, of course I did. I did a film in France called Providence that Alain Resnais directed, and Dirk Bogarde and David Warner, Ellen Burstyn, John Gielgud. There were only about 7, I think, in the cast. Yeah, no, I've really worked with some lovely people over the years.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, 'cause he's definitely one of my favorites too. John
Yeah,
Gielgud.
yeah.
Let's see. Let's get to your book, because that's what we were supposed to be talking about.
Yes, I've written now quite a few books. This past year, I wrote 3 books, all of them on caregiving, all of them published by Grand Harbor. Now With You, Now Without, Happy Hour, and A Welcome Respite, and Last Dance at the Savoy. All of those books are about caregiving, because my husband, who passed away a number of years ago, required home care, and so I learned quite a lot. And I think that there are so many people now who who do find themselves in that position, caring for a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a loved one. And what I learned over that period of time, and of course I sort of kicked back on acting and writing for a portion of that time, and because I kept notes, because that's what you do when somebody has a progressive illness. That's what you do or should do, and so when my husband passed away, I had a template for a book. So I ended up writing several books. I don't think I'll write any more books on caregiving, but I am very grateful that I wrote those. And all of them are on Amazon.com. If you just go on Amazon.com and put in my name, Kathryn Leigh Scott, all of these books will pop up. And the Dark Shadows book is Dark Shadows, Return to Collinwood. It's everything you could want to know about the show. That's available. All of these books are also available on my website. If you want a signed copy, just go to www.kathrynleightscott.com. And I'm working on a novel now called September Girl. I'm just finishing what I hope will be the final draft. And I've written a number of other books, including The Bunny Years, about the 25-year history of the Playboy clubs. If you go on Amazon.com, just type in my name, you'll see them.
And you're going to get a barrage of book titles that you've written, yeah?
Yes, I've written, maybe 20.
Wow.
So I've been nonfiction and fiction. I've also written a mystery series. A Jinx Fogarty mystery series. I do love mysteries, so no, you'll find quite a lot. But I think that if you're interested in Dark Shadows, the Return to Collinwood book, and if you are one of those people facing caregiving issues and looking after a loved one, then I really urge you to read Now With You, Now Without.
Your husband passed away of something called progressive supranuclear palsy. Is that correct?
Oh, you did well. Yes, it's one of the 5. It's a neurological disease in a family of 5 such diseases that includes cortical basal degeneration, Lewy body with dementia, which is what Robin Williams had, multiple systems atrophy, and of course Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS.
Okay.
They're all very similar. They're all, progressive degenerative diseases. And for the last several years, I've been a volunteer spokesperson for CurePSP, and that organization does such a lot to aid caregivers, but also to do research into these degenerative diseases. In fact, a lot of the work that they have been doing has informed the research into Alzheimer's and these other motor neuron diseases.
Now, as I remember when we talked about this when you were on the last time, you said that the doctors had a difficult time diagnosing your husband at first.
Yes, all of these diseases are slightly different. And of course, in the early stages, the symptoms mirror so many other things. And since they happen in prime of life, you can put it down to aging. Stiffness, or in my husband's case, there were just frequent falls, and he blamed it on being clumsy, on cracks in the sidewalk. But then when the falls became too frequent, that's when I realized that there was something wrong. And the falls were also, they call it retropulsion. The falls were always backward. And that is a sign, that is a very definite and clear sign of progressive supranuclear palsy. Another sign is that when we were driving, I would say, "Oh, look over there." And my husband would get irritated and say, "I'm driving," or whatever. Well, the problem is, and I didn't realize it at first, but he couldn't shift his eyes. And it was also one of the reasons why he would stumble. It's because he could not shift his eyes up and down, and had difficulty shifting them to the right and left. That's another very clear hallmark of PSP. All of these diseases have their particular signs, and so many people are misdiagnosed. They can go misdiagnosed for a couple of years. I think that happens with Alzheimer's too. Somebody is just forgetful. You get names mixed up, or you walk into the kitchen and wonder, why did you go in the kitchen? What were you going to get? Those are common things that I think everybody experiences. It's just when they happen all the time.
Is there any sort of treatment available? Was there anything they could do for him?
No, there was no treatment or cure available for any of these diseases. There are medications that you can take off-label. My husband was taking medications for everything from restless leg syndrome to memory loss. And it's always in the hope that there might be an ingredient in one of these medications off-label that will help somehow. The standard medication, I think, for Parkinson's disease, of course, is carbidopa, levodopa, or Sinemet. My husband took that, although I don't think there was any appreciable difference. But there aren't any medications. There aren't any treatments except good diet and exercise. That's really it, which is why there's such a lot of research being done into these diseases.
Good diet and exercise
Well, now that sounds really, that was hugely helpful. I arranged a pulley system over the door so that my husband could exercise his arms. I would take him for walks. Toward the end, he was in a wheelchair, but I could still get him up using a gait belt to walk him. But there are so many things that happen, especially in the later stages of a degenerative disease. And isolation is one of the things that both caregivers and the patient experience. And the reason why I wrote Happy Hour is that I instituted what I called Happy Hour from 5 to 7 every day, so that friends and former colleagues and family always knew they could drop in, and we were ready to entertain. And I just took anything having to do with medications or handicap equipment out of the room. And my husband and I, we would serve coffee, a glass of wine, a beer, a sandwich, cakes, whatever. Just making people feel welcome so that they could drop in and visit. Because again, it's not just diet and exercise, but it's also that social contact, a contact that really keeps hope alive. It gives you something to live for.
So you think all of that prolonged his quality of life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without any question. Just feeling like you are still part of the world around you. When you become isolated and your world gets smaller and you're not able to get out and move around, you can't really go to restaurants. And I even took my husband on trips. I found that the easiest way to take him on a trip, and he loved to travel, was going on a cruise. And it was just during the year before he passed away, I took him to South America, and he loved it. He thrived on travel. And the thing about taking a cruise is that you unpack once. True. You have a doctor on board.
Yeah.
You have people that are there, crew members there to assist. You can take the day as you want to, as you feel up to, participating. So it turned out to be the best way for him to travel. And again, being surrounded by people. My husband was the founding editor of Los Angeles Magazine, which was the first city magazine in the country, preceding New York Magazine by a good 8 years. And he was social. He was outgoing. He loved being out and trying new things, new restaurants. So just because he became ill, those interests weren't diminished. So I guess my overall reason for writing the book is just to remind everybody, and everybody knows it. You want to get the most out of life that you can, and enjoy whatever time you have with a loved one. So I think we really did make the most of those years together as his health deteriorated.
How long was he at a point where he needed full-time care?
Oh, I would say he really became symptomatic maybe 5 years, 6 years before he passed away. And we took the big trips first, once we had the diagnosis. I would say the last 3 years he required, I needed to be there most of the time. I mean, he needed assistance walking, feeding himself. I could not leave him alone, put it that way. The falls, just keeping him safe. A fall, he did fall once and broke his shoulder, and he never fully recovered from that. Breaking a hip, or mobility is everything.
Yeah. This book is called Now With You, Now Without, and it really is. It's a glimpse of our life before he became ill and before he was diagnosed, and it follows through even in the aftermath after he passed away. Because one other thing that a caregiver does deal with is that when you lose somebody who's central to your life, you feel empty-handed. You're used to being a caregiver, and you have a schedule, a routine, because that's so important as a caregiver, and then suddenly you don't have that anymore. So really, readjustment into quotidian life without a loved one is a big step. Well, it sounds like you're keeping very busy.
Oh, I'm loving it. I mean, I miss Geoff. I always will, but it took a little while to get back into acting and writing, both of which I've always done. But even when Geoff was ill, I would sit next to him with my laptop, and I would write. At the end of the day, I would read him what I'd written during the day, and of course I had the benefit of his editing. He was a wonderful editor. So we had a very good life together. And when I, was living a single life, it took a little while to kind of reclaim myself. But now I've written several books since he passed away. And I've certainly done an awful lot of acting, and I hope that just continues. I love working.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I
Kathryn,
really do.
we've got to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. It was a real treat talking to you again. And best of luck with everything. You said that if people go to Amazon, look up Kathryn Leigh Scott, and you will get a giant list of all the books that you've written.
Right. Actually, if you type in Dark Shadows, my name will pop up, and you'll see a lot of my other books as well. And one thing I wanted to say, I do have a website, KathrynLeighScott.com, and there's a way of reaching me. There's a way to contact me. And I always love hearing from people. So do go to my website and have a little look around. You'll see all of the books there, but you'll also see, some of the other things that I do.
Well, best of luck with everything you're doing, and thank you again.
Oh, thank you for having me back. I loved it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Kathryn Leigh Scott. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Also, thank you to Betweenzone, Aaron Bloomer, Joshua, and Valeria Prida. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
Give us